Can you explain how acetazolamide actually works, or what it does to your patient's bicarbonate and potassium levels? By the end of this video, you will be so confident about these electrolytes and you'll have that sweet satisfaction feeling oh so clever. Could there be anything better? The idea for this video actually came up because I was teaching inside my program, the Renal for the Written program. I was doing a whiteboard tutorial on renal physiology and diuretics and all the things. It was great. But then one of the students asked a question about acetazolamide and they showed me an MCQ table that looked a bit like this. And I thought, what a cruel world. And then I thought, actually, do you know what? Like if someone just explains it to you, this is super, super doable. Hello Dr. Humans, welcome back to the channel and to today's video where we are going to be conquering acetazolamide and some other diuretics, and in particular the electrolyte imbalances that they cause. We'll be matching each of these diuretics to its effect on bicarbonate and potassium, and by the end we'll have our table solved. Now, just to be clear, these electrolyte patterns that come up in exam questions are really pointing to toxicities or adverse effects of these drugs. And so if you see these electrolyte patterns in your patients, just know that they are not normal and they need to be managed, including consideration of stopping the drug. Okay? But that said, let's connect these medications with the abnormalities in our table. And I'm going to tell you that the trick to answering this question is understanding that whilst all of these medications have a diuretic effect, they also have the potential to disrupt acid-base balance, and that's where those bicarbonate results come in. And just to make sure that we're all on the same page, let's just start with a quick refresher on diuretics. The idea of diuretics is that water follows two things: sodium and concentration gradients. Water simply cannot resist these two things and will follow them wherever they go. If we reabsorb more sodium, then we'll reabsorb more water. And equally, if we lose more sodium in our urine, we'll lose more water in the urine as well. And sodium has a few different mechanisms of absorption throughout the nephron. In the proximal tubule, there's lots of sodium uptake. The proximal tubule is your mass recycling, mass reabsorption center. So here, sodium has many different channels and ways to get back into the body. Then we have the loop of Henle. This uses sodium and other solutes to create a concentration gradient via the NKCC2 channel, or sodium potassium chloride cotransporter. And this is the channel that is blocked by loop diuretics like Frusemide. So the idea here is the loop of Henle is putting all these solutes into the interstitium in order to create a concentration gradient that later the collecting duct will use, right? The collecting duct will put some aquaporins, and because of this juicy concentration gradient, water is going to move towards it. And in blocking this, we're actually blocking the concentration gradient from being formed. We're going to lose a lot of salt and water by putting someone on Frusemide. And in the distal nephron, so the distal tubule and in the collecting duct, we have more of a fine-tuning process. We have the sodium chloride cotransporter, or NCC. This is blocked by thiazide diuretics, and we won't be covering those today because they're not relevant to our MCQ, to our table. But if you would like to cover the full spectrum of diuretics and the electrolyte abnormalities, including the effect on calcium and magnesium, then be sure to sign up for the Renal for the Written program and head on over to Tubule School in there, and I'll leave a link to that below. But moving on here to the collecting duct, we have the ENaC channel, the epithelial sodium channel. And this is the channel that's under the influence of aldosterone. And so spironolactone or any kind of mineralocorticoid receptor antagonist is going to be blocking this mechanism of sodium uptake. Now, you may have clicked on this video to learn about acetazolamide, and don't worry, we got you. We will cover that very soon. But the truth is, in order to understand the potassium issue with acetazolamide, we first need to take a look at aldosterone, because aldosterone is the ultimate connection between diuretics and acid base across the board. This is going to blow your mind. Stay with me. So the way I like to teach aldosterone is that it has a day job and a side hustle. The day job of aldosterone is coming to the collecting duct and increasing salt and water reabsorption. So when we have a low blood volume, we activate our renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. Aldosterone comes here with the intention of improving sodium uptake, and therefore we can absorb more water as well. But it also has a side hustle, and that side hustle is promoting hydrogen pumps in the collecting duct as well. So promoting the amount of hydrogen that ends up in our urine, and hydrogen ions are just acid, right? So aldosterone helps us to lose acid in our urine. Okay, so aldosterone has those two functions, the day job and the side hustle. And when it comes to the tubules, it's going to do both of those things, right? It's not going to discriminate. It's going to do all of its jobs when it comes here. And aldosterone can be stimulated by low blood volume, or it can be stimulated by acidotic conditions when we need to lose acid, right? So it can be stimulated by both of those things, but when it comes to the tubules, it's going to do all of the above, right? All of the above. So let's just check that out on this diagram right here. Aldosterone comes to the collecting duct. It binds to the mineralocorticoid receptor, and that changes the transcription of genes within the cell, and it promotes the placement of many different channels on the cell surface. So we've got the ENaC channel, the epithelial sodium channel. We've got RACP, which is a potassium channel. We've got sodium potassium ATPase, and we've got those hydrogen pumps as well. And so now we have all these pumps that have been promoted on the cell surface, and they're going to ramp up in terms of their function. Now, just drawing your attention to the sodium potassium ATPase. This was put on planet Earth to create a concentration gradient inside this cell, right? So we're going to pump sodium into the body. And as we do that, we're going to reduce the amount of sodium inside the cell, and that is going to cause a wonderful concentration gradient to reabsorb sodium from the lumen, right, from the tubular lumen. So this sodium is going to come into the cell, and it's going to be continuously pumped through back into the body. But you can see that as that happens, as the sodium comes back into the body, it's being exchanged with potassium, and that potassium's got to have somewhere to go. And that potassium travels through this little potassium channel called RACP and is lost in the urine. So when aldosterone comes to the kidney, we reabsorb more sodium and therefore water. We also lose potassium and we lose hydrogen in the urine each and every time. Now, I want you to hold that thought for me, because everything that we just said about aldosterone is actually so important for understanding the electrolyte abnormalities when it comes to acetazolamide and frusemide. But relevant to filling in our table, we can see here that if we block aldosterone with spironolactone, we're going to have more hydrogen ions around and therefore more acid around. And so that means the bicarb is going to mop this up and the bicarb's going to go down, right? In acidosis, the bicarb goes down. And at the same time, if we block aldosterone, what happens to the potassium? The potassium will go up, right? So spironolactone, we've got reduced bicarbonate and we've got increased potassium. That is the vibe. Now, whilst that's fresh, let's see how this connects to acetazolamide and frusemide for that matter. With acetazolamide, this is a carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, and this is very important for bicarbonate reabsorption in the nephron. Let me show you. So bicarbonate is filtered into the proximal tubule from our blood very freely. All of your bicarbonate is ending up here in the proximal tubule. But here in the proximal tubule, and indeed throughout the rest of the nephron, there are no specific bicarbonate transporters, right? And you can see that this is a very important ion that we need to be reabsorbing. So how on earth do we get that bicarbonate back into the body? And this is very creative and very clever. In order to reabsorb bicarbonate, we actually combine it with hydrogen ions. So hydrogen ions are pumped into the tubular lumen in order to bind with bicarbonate. When these come together, they make H2CO3, which then is converted into water and carbon dioxide by an enzyme called carbonic anhydrase. You see where I'm going with this? And even though bicarbonate couldn't come across, carbon dioxide and water can very easily come across into this cell. From there, the carbon dioxide and water are then converted back into bicarbonate ions, which go into the body, and hydrogen ions, which can then be recycled, pumped back into the tubule to grab another bicarbonate ion, and so on and so forth. And this cycle continues until we've absorbed most of the bicarb that came in there. And the enzyme that is at the heart of converting that CO2 and water back into these ions is carbonic anhydrase, right? So we can see that the enzyme at the heart of this whole bicarbonate reabsorption rig is carbonic anhydrase. And something to point out here is that the hydrogen that's pumped out into the tubule lumen is exchanged with sodium, right? So when we use acetazolamide, this is a carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, it blocks this enzyme and means that we have difficulty reabsorbing bicarbonate. Of course, we're going to lose more bicarbonate in the urine, but at the same time, we're actually going to get less of this sodium-hydrogen exchange. So there's now less sodium coming back into the body, and therefore more sodium in the urine, and water will follow that sodium. And that's why acetazolamide causes this diuretic effect. So we can easily see how acetazolamide would reduce the bicarbonate and promote acidosis, but how does it affect the potassium? And this is where aldosterone comes back in again, right? We said aldosterone is stimulated by two things. The first thing is the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system when we have low blood volume, but the second thing that stimulates aldosterone is acidosis. So if acetazolamide comes along and causes acidosis, it will stimulate aldosterone, which then comes to the kidney and causes potassium loss in the urine. Boom. So for acetazolamide, we're looking for both low bicarb and low potassium in combination. And so coming back to our little table here, we can cross out these ones and narrow in on these final options, which brings us to Frusemide. From your clinical practice, you're probably aware that Frusemide can cause a low potassium. Frusemide blocks the NKCC2 transporter in the loop of Henle. So it's intuitive that less potassium is going to be taken in, right? We're blocking potassium uptake as part of this, and we're going to lose more potassium in the urine. But its effect on bicarbonate is far less intuitive. If Frusemide toxicity was to occur, this can lead to an alkalosis because aldosterone, right? If there is a profound salt and water wasting to the point where you've got Frusemide toxicity, the body will compensate by stimulating the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, increasing aldosterone, and this will go to the collecting duct to help conserve salt and water. But whilst it's there, it will promote loss of hydrogen ions and loss of potassium ions because it's there, right? It just cannot help itself. And that loss of hydrogen ions results in alkalosis. It's all coming together. How easy is this? Now, admittedly, there is some concept of contraction alkalosis and chloride playing a role in this pattern and all the things, but I'm a simple girl and I much prefer bringing things together this way. But just know that this explanation to some people will be an oversimplification. Regardless, I think this is the easiest way to get us to the right answer in our table, and so we're doing it this way, okay? And so now, boom, we have Frusemide associated with low potassium, but also alkalosis, represented by a high bicarbonate level. And I mean, isn't that just beautiful? It's just all come together so easily. We now have everything we need to connect the dots and blitz this table. And just like that, you have decoded this MCQ, you sorted it out, you know how to answer this question now, you rock. And if you want to keep studying here with me on YouTube, you might want to check out this video right here. And of course, join the Renal for the Written program. Head on over to our website. I'll leave a link below. And otherwise, I will see you right here back on YouTube for some more high yield learning.